Vaidyanathan, Managing Director and CEO of IDFC First Bank now joins us. Mr. Vaidyanathan, good morning. Thank you for joining us. We got you at a time when things are indeed looking upbeat. The budget has surprised us. Growth is back from the throes of pandemic to a complete level of excitement. Things indeed are looking up, aren't they?
No doubt about it. I think that if you see all indicators that are coming across all sectors, whether FMCG or sales of tractors and vehicles, and everything is all looking up, I think.
Things are looking up for IDFC Bank as well. Things are looking up on the retail front. However, some would argue that the challenge is the historical challenge which you have in the MSE and SME book. So while retail book is growing, how do you plan to address the other aspect?
Actually, there is no challenge in the MSE book. The challenge was actually the large corporate exposure, infrastructure exposure. So our infrastructure exposure at merger was about 22,000 crores. We are very aware that infrastructure has to come down because infrastructure, as you know, Nikunj, you talk to people all the time, is so it has its own challenges in terms of how it can get mired in some issue or the other. So that book we have brought down to 11,000 crores now. So our game plan is next maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe we bring it out as good as nil. And that is a big one. On MSME and on consumer, frankly, that is our stable business and that is a staple business, and that is doing fantastically well.
I want to understand the CASA side of your business. The fact that you are offering the best rates in the industry has really helped you to get a lot of low-cost deposits. You've been successful in getting low-cost deposits. What happens next now? Obviously, you can't pay such high rates for savings.
Two things here. First of all, we had a historical borrowing rate because remember IDFC Limited was at DFI and had borrowed at about 8.5%, and even Capital First and NBFC had borrowed around that rate. So we had a large borrowing at that rate. So we kept paid 7%. 7% is a good rate compared to 8.5%, and we kept swapping that money. But that's then. The important thing is that our incremental flow from the customers on CASA has been like phenomenal, and our CASA rate is now at 48%. So obviously at 48% we are feeling very, very comfortable. Our liquidity in the bank is like 17,000 crores as we speak today at the time we file the quarterly results. So obviously we don't need to pay 7% anymore. So we have brought down the rates to 6%. But frankly, we are a very customer first organization. Even at 6, we are among the let me say that we are among still the attractive rates in the market today. And by the way, the 6% change will also increase the net interest margins.
Fair point. I'm curious to get your reaction on a Morgan Stanley report dated 31st of December, a day before budget, when you came out with numbers. Headline beat, core miss. Treasury gains drove the beat, but else profits were near zero. Stress assets ratio is at 13% and the coverage is 46%. Basically, they are calling you one of the most expensive banks looking at the underlying growth.
See, they have always called us the most expensively overvalued bank, if I may, something of that term. Now, actually, in this report, they made a mistake. I think it's an honest mistake. I don't think there's malice behind it. But they made a mistake whereby they added the bonds exposure and non-funded exposure on the numerator, but in the denominator, they forgot to add that. So if you net of it, actually the numbers are much lesser than what they represented. But I think it's a genuine mistake. They'll hopefully fix that. But I think stepping away from that, they have actually never got us wrong. You go back and see the track record. They have always been wrong. So how do you deal with someone who's always been wrong about you? So I will leave it at that. Let me just say that one more thing, by the way, before I sign off. On this issue, they are just being very mathematical about us. But how do you value a phenomenal intellectual property the bank is building? How do you value the fact that this bank has shown the capability of growing from 100 crores to 30,000 crores, from 30,000 crores at merger become 60,000 crores? We are now projecting to the 1 lakh crore. That sort of a growth on the retail side, no valuation, they can't see it. They can't, they can't see the fact that NIM has grown from 1.5%, 1.6% to 4.6%. They can't see PPOP has moved from 30 crores to pre-merger to 500 crores, even without treasury. They just can't see any of these things. They're just going on one issue that, look, your ROE is low. Fine, our ROE will come. It will come. They're building a good bank. ROE will come. It will be a mid-teens, will be a 18% ROE bank, in my opinion. And they will reverse their opinion at that time.
So when do you think your ROA, I'm going to add one more bit here, ROA and ROE will be in and around industry averages?
Definitely we're getting there. You see, let's just get back to the core. The core is the ability to lend in a safe manner, in a risk-adjusted manner, and that capability we have demonstrated quite a time. In Capital First, the NIM was close to 9%. In this bank, our NIM was already touched 4.6%. So let me say, on the retail side, just imagine now we're going to borrow money at 6% incrementally because of saving rates at 6% at the peak. We're going to borrow money at 6%. Our lending is on an average around 15%, but we lend anywhere between 9% to 20% depending on the product segment. You borrow at 6, lend at 15, you have to make money. It has to become ROE accretive. Forget, over time infrastructure problems will go away, over time some of the corporate loans issues will go away. They'll all go away, it's a matter of time, they've already been going away. So when this book superimposes that book, and by the way, risk adjusted, our credit loss used to be 3%. Our incremental projection is only 2% because our credit quality is improving. So if you lend at 15, 16, you have a 2% credit loss, this is 14% risk adjusted money, you're borrowing money at 6, it's pretty plain, it has to make money. And it has to be ROE positive. So my sense is that ROE will come, it's only a matter of time.
I'm going to ask a question which in a sense I've been asking every banker. Is it the right way to look at a bank purely based on price to book, or should one look at P multiples? Because ultimately it's about growth. The whole challenge of looking at price to book is such a variable concept in this kind of an environment that you never get the clear picture. Like in your case, I can make and slice your book in many ways depending on my assumption. Rather than focusing on that, should one focus on absolute growth?
Banks raise the equity from time to time, and therefore, hence the price to book becomes a benchmark. But even in terms of price to equity, price to book, people normally factor return on equity in the equation. That is one of the reasons Morgan Stanley goes after us every time saying that your ROE is low. But anyway, coming back to the ROE point, they are looking at us at 2% ROE today. But they should not forget that in a previous company, we removed the ROE from negative to 15%, to in fact heading towards 20. So even here, ROE will come. So to your, of course, question, I explained to you the reason why price to book is used as benchmark, but frankly, it go either way. By the way, consumer companies, we are now consumer companies. Remember, because we're like 62% retail, in the next 2-3 years, we'll probably be 80%. Then consumer companies are valued price to earnings, and then it's a close case to values.
Which was the point I was trying to derive? I mean, why should one ultimately, banks are a play on economy and consumer, then why should we look at historical benchmarks? But we'll keep that conversation for some other time.
It's also because how would you corporate loans? If you take a consumer company and think of like a consumer company, you can value it like a consumer company.
No, that's a great point. I mean, ultimately, there's a corporate book which we need to be cognizant of. So let's talk about the infrastructure sector. The government is committed to spend a lot on infrastructure sector. I expect that once the bad bank and other factors would be at play, things would not incrementally, but they would dramatically change for the infrastructure sector. So the legacy problem, do you think now could in a sense be a future growth driver also? Are we looking at that kind of a scenario?
No, we're not going there at all. First of all, what the government has done on infrastructure is fantastic, and as an Indian, as a resident of this country, we obviously feel proud that someone is going after infrastructure the way this government is doing. Not just in bad bank and not just that 20,000 crores and DFI. it's also kind of investment government is putting out in infrastructure is crazy. But we will have derived advantage of all that investment. Derived advantage, meaning when money goes to the roads, ports, infrastructure, etc., that leads to, that money goes on to the vendors are contractors are employees, the whole chain and cement and steel and everything starts moving, consumption moves. So we will have a derived play of consumption. Really, infrastructure has some challenges, and I think everybody recognizes that. We are not going there, short answer. We just want to be a fantastic consumer bank. Well-growing, good risk management, good corporate governance consumer bank.
Okay. In today's world where everything is perhaps going digital and fintech disruptions are happening, and they are particularly happening in the consumer banking and the consumer retail space, how will you differentiate yourself?
We are really at the front of that. We love it, first of all, because we know that game. We played that game for 10 years. Basically this game can be very unnerving for those who don't know the game. But that's where we were born. We were born fintech. So, for example, we have the ability to give out, consumer loans after doing all kind of algorithms of fraud, analytics, credit bureau, everything in a matter of seconds. We give out close to about, we have about 3 to 4 million loans, what we can give out a year through the use of technology. So even on the liability side, they use technology to create effect. The kind of CASA we've got is also because of a technology capability, not just because of pricing. So the short answer is that therefore we are very good at this space, and I think we will lead on the front. By the way, we have a new app coming up, which is very, very advanced. You can have a look at that.
I look forward to experiencing that. A very basic yardstick which markets and investors use is that what is the promoter commitment towards business, which is ownership patterns. Your ownership has been gliding down. Has that been done consciously? And if you've sold, why? You're sounding excited about future. You think worst is behind, growth is back. Then why are you selling or reducing your stake?
No, actually it had a sequence. I know what you're referring to. When it was capital first, I gave away stock to some people because I thought they all helped build the company. When Corona happened, and I had about 20% of my holding. Then when Corona happened, I had to sell a significant holding because of I'm not a generational wealthy guy, so I borrowed money to buy the stock. So and did a leverage buyout of the bank. Of the prior company, my apologies. So I had a leverage. So in Corona I got stuck, so I sold. Then later I gifted some stock to some people whom I thought were very valuable in my life in the past. So it is more, I don't know, wealth is good only when it rotates and when it keeps moving on rather than getting accumulated to one demat account. So it's got nothing to do with nothing to do with commitment. My commitment is 100%. I think the bank is like 100% mine. I work like that. So no investor need to worry on that front.
Is the leverage which you took when you committed to this transaction, is that leverage on your balance sheet still there, or that leverage is over?
It's over. So unfortunately, I had to square it at that depth of Corona at 20 rupees or something. But that was the moment. But nothing. I don't have any leverage on account of those matters anymore.
You've been very honest, and I really appreciate that. It's rarity that when you ask a direct question, you get a direct and a straight response. I'm going to twist my next question completely different. While one side, there are some investors who are saying that why is Mr. Vaidyanathan reducing stake? The other set of investors, especially on social media, you said Mr. Vaidyanathan is running this bank, and this bank is going to be the turnaround one and the big one, looking at his past experiences. So for those who are getting worried, you've addressed that they should not worry about your ownership pattern changing. But for those who are excited about what you could do you think they should also temper it down?
Yeah, I'm very aware that to your question that a lot of people believe that they should put all the money in this bank because the future the bank is doing, or at least has a good future. I I would say to everybody that my honest answer would be that you should diversify. No matter how much you trust a bank on the equity front, because equity has gone ups and downs. There